we talked about how supply is a big part of the problem, and you read about a lack of supply everywhere. What people don't mention is that we have more housing square footage per person today in America than we've ever had in US history. So it's not a supply problem in the way that most people think, where you have to build, because you have more than enough empty bedrooms to solve the problem literally overnight. Like you could solve this problem tomorrow simply by filling empty bedrooms and still have millions of bedrooms left over to spare.
Hey, Colorado. So as real estate investors, you are aware of the affordability crisis we have in houses and rentals. You're also aware of how hard it is to achieve cash flow as a real estate investor in today's high price market and also our high interest rates. So if you followed the trends and the deals for a while now, you know one of our most favorite deal types is room by room rentals or shared living or co-living. Whatever you want to call it, it's where you get one house and you have multiple people renting out different bedrooms. It's a great way to provide a needed service out there to residents and also a great way to get double-digit cash flow in today's market. Now, the numbers have been great. The downside to that has been it's been very intensive, hands-on self-management, leaving out many landlords, many housing providers from being able to do this type of strategy. Well, I'm excited to say that Padsplit, a national company that specializes in shared living, has just come into the Denver market. So I've got two Padsplit people in here to come talk about what Padsplit is, the vision, and what they are expecting to see here in Denver. So if you're someone that wants to go out there and get high cash flow with room by room rentals, but don't want to do all the management yourself, then make sure you check out all the details. And even if you just want cash flow, make sure you listen in. All right. So the founder and CEO, Atticus LeBlanc. Good afternoon.
Great to be here.
Hey, I appreciate you flying in town for this.
Yeah, I mean, there are a few things I would fly into town just to do, but this is on the short list.
Oh, well, thank you. You already got some brownie points. And we also got Nick Bowers, who lives in Colorado Springs. He's a national account manager for Padsplit, but I love this. Before he worked for Padsplit, he was a Padsplit user and investor himself. Good morning, Nick.
Nice to meet you. Awesome to be here. It's been a wild ride, but love to see Padsplit gaining traction in Denver.
Yes, well, we need it out here, both for our residents and investors who want some cash flow. All right, Atticus, start with a little bit of your background in Padsplit, because I know you have a powerful story of being a real estate investor, seeing the affordability crisis, and then eventually launching Padsplit.
Yeah. I mean, it really started, before I really developed a passion for affordable housing and just providing opportunities, it was just about me and providing for my family. As I think I told you at the iCore presentation a few weeks ago, it's like 2007, I was a commercial real estate broker. My first son had just been born. My wife told me she was quitting her job. And I watched my entire pipeline of land deals evaporate over the course of the next 3 weeks, made a total of 10 grand for the year, and needed to figure out a way to actually just make a living for my family. And at that time, it happened. So Atlanta was kind of ground zero in a lot of ways for the crash. There were a lot of houses available under $50,000, if you can believe it. And that was 40-year lows. 1,100 houses was where I remember looking in November of 2007. And so this just kind of sent me down the rabbit hole of, okay, well, I've got to fend for myself. I like the idea of owning houses. And if I own 10 houses, then I can cover the salary that I otherwise would have wanted to earn to take care of my family. Long story short, I never got to 10 personally, but I bought 3 on my own the first year and then 13 others with other investors, and ended up buying about 120, borrowing hard money loans, then bought a bunch of apartments and commercial and all sorts of stuff over the next several years, and really just dove headfirst into sourcing and doing the renovation, then managing all of those deals independently. And one of the things that I learned throughout that process was that this room by room rental thing has always existed. My degree was in architecture and urban studies, but I'd never heard of a rooming house, which is what they're called in a lot of different areas, or congregate housing in some places. And I saw these things when I was driving all these neighborhoods and learning the ins and outs of the market that I was working in. And there were two guys that were renting rooms in a house next door to one that I owned that was vacant. And they said, "Hey, we're going to get evicted because this house is getting foreclosed. Can we come rent rooms from you?" And I was like, "Well, tell me about that. How does it work?" And this was early 2009. And it became clear immediately that, number one, these folks were on federally guaranteed income, but couldn't afford any other housing option anywhere in the entire city. And this is the depths of the Great Recession. And then simultaneously, not only would I occupy my house immediately, where I was already worried about the copper getting stolen and appliances and everything else, but I would make more money renting to these guys than I would renting it traditionally. And so that was the beginning of a really long and in-depth adventure and just learning experience, frankly, comparing some of the more traditional affordable housing programs. I started using Section 8 or Housing Choice for folks that are familiar with that. We were a public-private partner with the city of Atlanta using some federal funds to go reinvigorate neighborhoods. That was called the Neighborhood Stabilization Program. I've done tax credit deals along the way. And
like LIHTC stuff?
So not LIHTC specifically, but new markets tax credits, historic tax credits. The LIHTC deals in Atlanta are tough, or have been tough over the years. Certainly to try to get a 9% deal. It's just super, super competitive in that market. We were never really big enough to be in that space. But yeah, just learn the ins and outs over a number of years of the affordable housing industry and the problem, and was very close to the ground in terms of what people actually needed. And saw this solution over time, was comparing P&Ls across my deals of this rooming house and a couple others that I had started relative to traditional single family rentals, even that I had bought for 20, 30 grand, and apartments and commercial, and saw, well, this just beats the pants off of everything for a cash on cash return basis. The problem is it's super intensive from an operational perspective.
Yep.
And so I got to a point in my career by late 2016, I'd started a construction company. We'd started a hard money loan company. All of the assets were still running, and most of these businesses were being operated by folks that were I'd either recruited or known, and my longtime partner who I partnered up with in 2009. And so I didn't have a lot to do, and thought, okay, well, if there was a services layer that could actually address this operational complexity, this would be a scalable business, number one. And number two, this is clearly the fastest, most effective way to solve the housing crisis that I had seen starting in 2009, where you still had a huge portion of the population that couldn't afford any rentals. But that problem had just gotten worse. And so Padsplit was born out of an ideas competition where I wrote a white paper and said, hey, if you guys are serious about solving this, what you should do, instead of thinking about more traditional subsidy programs or just going and get more funding, which, by the way, doesn't exist in the volume needed to solve the problem, you should take a lesson from Airbnb, where 6 million listings at the time had been created over that 8-year period, and empower those individual movers and shakers, whether they're owner occupants or individual investors, who are putting their own butts on the line to make something that they think is better, that they believe is better than what already exists. And I had watched those same people transform the city of Atlanta from 2008 to 2016. And so Padsplit was really born with that concept in mind, and that we could take the lessons from Airbnb and apply them to affordable housing. And my thesis was that if you could show these investors and owner occupants how affordable housing could be more profitable and a better alternative to whatever the other strategies might be, including Airbnb, then they would go do it independently, and they would scale without a lot of public funding and create these options that ultimately created financial independence for both sides, right? For the people who didn't have access to traditional rentals, and for the investors that, like myself, were just trying to create a pathway to wealth for their family and sustainability.
So Padsplit launched in 2016?
So that was when December.
the ideas.
Yeah, December 2016. It was not called Padsplit. It was like, so Striant was the other company, which is still around, that I formed with my partner in 2009. It was like Striant Solutions to Spatial Inefficiency in Housing, Lack of Affordability. It was really catchy.
Padsplit's better, yeah.
Really catchy term. And we didn't win, but we got a small grant from the JP Morgan Chase Foundation and a large national nonprofit called Enterprise. And that really just kind of put spurs to me to say, all right, well, let's go do this thing. I converted the first one in 2017. And then we got our first third-party client in 2018.
Okay.
So we say 2018 is really the official. And that's when we incorporated, and I picked a catchier name.
So about 6 years. And then how many markets and how many units does Padsplit have now?
Yeah, it's about 16,000 units across the country. A unit for us is a bedroom. I should qualify that. And it could be an accessory dwelling unit as one unit, or it could be a house with 6 or 7 bedrooms, and each one of those bedrooms is a unit. So it covers the gamut of typology. But yeah, we're in 20 major U.S. markets. I think 21 with Colorado.
Okay.
But we can go anywhere. It's just a question of where can we afford to put folks on the ground in those larger markets.
Now, I mean, we just connected a few weeks ago at an iCore event. And I know you guys have some units coming online soon in Denver.
We do.
So kind of why Denver and what opportunities do you see in Denver?
Yeah. So, I mean, ultimately our vision is anyone, anywhere, right? We want to be able to service anyone that has a housing need. From the resident side, and our mission is to help solve the affordable housing crisis one room at a time while leveraging housing as a vehicle for financial empowerment, and that's on both sides. And so Denver was kind of a logical next step for us. Candidly, we have some great partners here, and we were seeing some inbound demand from Denver. It's obviously a large metropolitan area, and we know that they have a massive housing supply shortage here. And so Padsplit was designed to solve 2 major problems. One is the lack of supply, and 2 is the lack of access. You have both of those problems in...
Define lack of access?
So lack of access means the folks who don't qualify to be able to get into a housing unit.
Okay.
So they have a job or they have an income, but for whatever reason, there's not enough supply to create affordability for them. But more importantly, even when you have high supply markets, you sometimes still have this access problem, which is like if people choose a 3-to-1 income to rent ratio and somebody's making $15 an hour, okay, well, that's only $31,200 a year. Well, guess what? They don't qualify for a $1,000 a month apartment.
Yep.
And so if you're in a market like Denver that doesn't have any $1,000 a month apartments, what does somebody making $15 an hour do? Like, they don't have access to the housing supply. Even if there were thousands of apartments available, if the minimum price was $1,000 and there was a 3-to-1 income to rent ratio, then it doesn't matter, right? Those folks are still locked out. Other barriers are high minimum credit scores, high upfront deposits. And so there's certainly a correlation between supply and access, but it's not direct. Sometimes those barriers to access still exist. And so we try to solve both problems simultaneously.
That makes sense. Now, can you talk about the membership structure Padsplit has? Because when I first heard it, I understand it, but it's different than how most like housing providers and residents, have leases together.
Yeah. Well, there are a couple different reasons for the membership structure. The first is legal in nature. You actually don't have this problem in Colorado, thanks to Governor Polis. Over the summer, but in most jurisdictions in America, family is defined at a local level, even though person may be defined at a statewide level. It's silly, right? It's just silly. And within jurisdictions, Atlanta's a good example. We have 83 different local jurisdictions, 83 different definitions of family. Sometimes a city may say, "Oh, well, grandparents don't count as part of your family." And domestic servants do. And you can have an unlimited number of domestic servants, but no more than 2 unrelated people that are allowed to live together. And these rules differ, like depending on which side of the street you're on.
Yep.
And so the creative structure that we had come up with initially, or really an attorney that I hired with that initial grant, was that because person's defined on a statewide basis and a corporation counts as a person, you can create a legal entity and those residents actually become members of that legal entity in the same way that they become operating members of a corporation.
That makes sense.
And so the landlord is only ever renting to one person, and then those individuals are on that lease. By the way, there's a lot of constitutional law that should preclude the enforcement of any of these local jurisdictions, but there's just a disconnect there from an enforcement perspective. So that's one thing. On a higher level, it's more about just more than housing, right? How do we create a platform that is more than just about rooms? And so for us, from Padsplit fees, we report all on-time payments to credit bureaus so that people can see their credit scores increase and they get to experience some level of financial empowerment. We provide access to telemedicine because when someone has a medical issue, you want to make sure that they also have the capacity to pay their rent as well. It was imperative from my perspective that utilities, furniture, Wi-Fi are included in one payment because it just makes it so much easier for that individual to pay and to budget around that payment. And so membership in and of itself allows those individuals, one, access to this network of opportunities where instead of they're tied into one place, they can transfer, whether it is across town because they move jobs or across the country because they have a completely new opportunity. And so there's a significant carrot, if you will, for those residents to become members of Padsplit and retain their membership. And so you're aligning incentives in that way as well.
I like it. So as a member, they can, rent from the various Padsplit inventory out there, but then Padsplit's also reporting their payments to credit bureaus.
Yes.
And also offering like a teledoc or telemedicine features part of the membership.
Exactly.
That is really unique. And that just to help, because that's often what wipes out people's,
sure,
if they have an emergency fund or not. The medical bills is what wipes out so many people, unfortunately.
Yeah. It was just practical. I think, again, I come from an investor mindset and I want individuals to be able to pay for their rent.
Yep.
Right. I care about my residents, but this is also a business at the end of the day, as it is for any other investor out there. And if Padsplit as a service provider has the scale to be able to create some of these buffers to extreme hardship, then that's an added benefit that makes it more likely that your prospective resident will be able to make those payments on time. And so I want to make it as easy as possible and as likely as possible that resident can pay you for the service that you are rendering to them.
That makes a lot of sense. I totally agree with the logic there. And you treat your customers, you treat your clients right.
Yeah.
It's a good business decision. Nick, I want to loop you in the conversation because I love your story. And this is, something I always look for in investments and just, companies in general. But talk about you as an investor, getting the first Padsplit, and then the transition to actually working with Padsplit, because I think that speaks so much for itself.
Yeah, it was an interesting journey, really. So like backing up on my perspective a little bit, I was self-employed for about 8 years, independent artist. I had equity in my home, Colorado Springs. We had a huge boom and appreciation. So the thought was, how can I tap into this equity and what kind of exit strategy can I deploy within real estate investing? Did YouTube University, bigger pockets, yep, all the good stuff, right? And I actually landed on it was not a networking thing, but a mastermind. Guy I've been following online for a while. I DM'd him one night and I was like, hey, I'll actually trade you some work, which is like some things I did, like cornhole sets, like custom painted flags. If you're interested, I'll trade you some work for a month of your mastermind. He said, yeah. So I got into it and I really dug in as much as I could every Tuesday and Thursday about how can I get into real estate investing, whatever that means. And I had him approach me one day and he's like, what's interesting to you, cash flow or scale? And I was like, well, I really want to replace my active income with cash flow, right? Passive income. So he was like, if that's true, you need to look into Padsplit. And I was like, what is Padsplit? Gave me a contact to Anthony Fontana in Atlanta. Had a conversation with him and he's like, all right, so, let's try to find you a house with 4 to 5 bedrooms. We'll add a couple more bedrooms and we'll have 7 people living in there. And I was like, what in the world are you talking about? Blew my mind. I was like, this sounds insane. Walk me through the process. We actually got our first property in South Atlanta. It was a 6-bedroom, which is extremely hard to find, but split level, great square footage. We converted the 7th bedroom in the living room. It rented out almost instantly in Padsplit. I mean, within a week, we had it fully occupied. Really, really good cash flow. And I really love the model so much. And I love Padsplit's growth trajectory and what they were doing for not only their members, but for their host. And it just seemed like so nuanced from everything else you hear around real estate investing. So I joined the company because I thought my perspective could be interesting, having lived in Colorado and investing halfway across the nation through this wild exit strategy that is Padsplit. So we bought our first property. I bought a second property in Orlando. And then I actually liquidated my first property. I sold it to a cash investor based out of California, 3-day close. And that's kind of the nice thing about this exit is a lot of people think, what do you do with this type of investing model after the fact if you want to sell it? Do you tear the walls back down, sell it single family? And we had an opportunity to sell it at a cap rate as a real estate cash flow generating model to an investor who wanted that. We had a 2-year rent roll, so it was an easy close for him. And then we bought 2 more properties. So now we have 5 total properties, 1 in Atlanta, 2 in Florida, investing halfway across the nation with Padsplit. Now I'm involved in a sales role and networking with people across the nation, trying to get them started with Padsplit and grow their portfolios.
And so all of your investments are Padsplits?
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And then when did you join Padsplit?
2 years ago. Yeah.
Okay.
Ish. 2.5.
All right, that was really cool. So question to both of you guys, because you actually mentioned that, hey, tearing down walls or bringing back up. So, in a lot of the rent by the rooms we do, we look for easy ways to add bedrooms. And a lot of times in Denver, that's converting a dining room no one uses, or out here, we have a lot of like the large unfinished basements, which, hey, we got an egress window or throw one in there, throw up some drywall, a door, maybe some electrical, for a couple grand, maybe a few grand with the window, we're able to add 2 or 3 more bedrooms. So as people come in, I know Atticus, you're also big on value. Like, hey, how do you add value to people? How to add value to the property? What type of guidance do you give people in terms of like, hey, layout optimization? And then what type of renovation costs are there? And how do you help people coordinate all that?
Yeah. So the first thing that I should pull up a second, like for Padsplit, I focused on what are the things that investors need that they either don't want to do on their own or can't do on their own. So if you're interested in rent by the room, like what are those things? And so the things that we specialize in are demand generation and just filling rooms as quickly as humanly possible. That's the first and I'd say probably biggest value add, even outside of marketing and lead gen, but getting those leads to convert and into those rooms. The second thing is the payments processing and collections, which can certainly be very awkward if you're an owner occupant. And it's helpful to have big brother, if you will, that's running that process. But we're also just really good at it. And we bill all inclusive on a weekly basis or per payday basis, which becomes really complex really quickly if you have more than a handful of rooms.
Yep.
And then the last piece is the social like dynamics and the technology and communications systems. And do you really want to give someone who's renting a room from you your cell phone, or do you want that to be shielded in the event that things go south? And just insights and data. So we're like AirDNA plus Airbnb for rent by the room, right? And then when it comes to your point, like converting a room or guidance. So we start with safety and just resident experience overall. Like what is the type of inventory we want on the platform? And so we take those HUD minimum standards and then we beef those up for fire safety. That's the first thing. And then we also say, okay, what's the very basic resident experience that's required? Okay, everybody needs a bed. They need lights. They need smoke detectors inside the rooms. They need some base level of furniture. They need egress windows from those bedrooms. And beyond that, we create these ecosystems, both from other hosts, like the one that Nick was referring to, who's both a real estate agent and a host. And so you have a real estate agent who can source a property. You have a series of contractors who understand what's required. And Then you have lenders, insurance providers, property managers, cleaners, et cetera. And this ecosystem of service providers who exist already in every market across America. And we just need to educate them. We provide tools, information, incentives so that they understand what it takes to be successful in their given market. And then we trust those people who are really close to the problems to be able to address them. And so to your question around what does it cost to convert a room? Average cost is probably $7,500. Now, in some cases, like I converted a room for $1,500. If you're converting a formal dining room and you're just putting a door on it, well, clearly that's less.
Yep.
And to go on Amazon and buy decent furniture, you're probably talking $1,000 to $1,500 to really outfit a room in its entirety. But what Padsplit does is make sure that the community exists of service providers to be able to specify within your local market, hey, this is what we've seen work here. And in some cases, like a neighborhood in Denver, maybe $1,200 rent, and another could be $800 rent. And there's a big distinction between those two, and understanding and what the member experience should be in all of these. And really, we just focus on some pretty basic principles of, look, you have to understand that you're competing in a marketplace like any other. And what do people care about? They care about the quality of the room that they're getting, and the quality of the experience that they're getting, quality of service, repair and maintenance, etc. Does the photo look good online? And we've got a number of tutorials and have done a number of podcasts and show up to groups like iCore to kind of walk through, hey, like here's where other hosts have been really successful. And we could have very different opinions, right? I mean, my strategy and outlook as a host is probably going to be different from Nick's in some cases. Like he has a bunch of 5-bedroom houses. Mine are anywhere between a 1-bedroom unit all the way to 16-unit duplex. And there's a wide variety of applications in there. And we just try to be the go-to resource to make those connections for people, but really be experts at the things that most owners don't want to do on their own, or frankly, just don't have the scale to do on their own.
Yeah, it seems like, I mean, my simplistic definition of you guys is kind of like the easy button for a lot of landlords who want to get into room by room, renting, because it's a needed product out there. It's a great business model, but it is so hard to scale. And unless you really spend the time and go in there and do a bunch of work, like it's a hard nut to crack. And so are a lot of your investors, I'll say kind of like the busier landlords, going to be more hands off and less intensive? I don't know if you have those type of like demographics for, because like here, most of our room by room landlords are guys in their 20s who are very hands on. They're in that phase of life where they're lost sweat equity. What does your landlord clients look like?
It is across the board, honestly. I mean, everyone from like a billionaire institutional family office down to someone who is renting 1 or 2 rooms in the house that they own and occupy. And certainly much more of the latter than the former. We have like 1,100 hosts right now. So I would 2 things on Padsplit being the easy button. Like, one, I want to manage expectations. There is no easy way. There's no easy way to cash flow,
investing in the
right?
day,
Like,
right?
Yeah. Like I have yet to find an easy button to make money. It is always work. Like it is you learn through the school of hard knocks, right? All the time. But is it easier? Yes. No question. It was designed to be easier, right? Because I was doing this as that mid-20s investor, scratching and clawing my way to kind of create financial independence for my family. And then over time, it just became a passion for creating these opportunities. But yeah, like I think the reality is, as a company, we can't just be the easy button. It's not a luxury product. We have to provide a service that creates more in value for you as a customer, whatever your background or profile may be. And if we're not doing that, then clearly we don't have a sustainable business. I think right now, what I strive for is covering our costs and clearly covering our costs in the advantages that we provide for those individuals, whether they are owner occupants, house hacking, or they are trying to scale a business. There's no question that you can scale a business with Padsplit. I mean, we have hosts with hundreds and hundreds of doors who have been institutional investors in this space. So if that's your plan, I don't think there's a way you could do it, or at least it would be very difficult to do it on your own. I mean, at this point, I've been in the rent by the room business for, 15 years now. And I've incorporated all of those learnings into this platform, and I've learned a heck of a lot in all of the different situations that we've had since. We've housed over 36,000 people at this point.
Wow.
So you can imagine, like, we've seen everything that there is to see. God help me. And I think there is some value. I hope there is some value in that experience. And I believe that there is for all of those customer types. But yeah, it's absolutely easier to scale. But if we're not paying for ourselves, just in the how much easier we make your life, either because we are marketing to a much wider segment than you would do independently, or because it is so much easier and the conversion rate of a prospect to a resident is so much higher because we've just made that application funnel and move-in funnel so much more streamlined than anything else out there, or because we're handling all the payments and collections and have built this suite of tools that come with the service to be able to make it work. Again, whether you have one unit or hundreds.
So walk me through a high level process, because I would fall in the category of, hey, I'm a busy professional. I'm more about scale, and I just, my time, my bandwidth is very limited, and it's, unless it gets a huge return on there, I'm very selective on my time. So I've personally moved away from a lot of, like, heavy hands-on type of investment for that very reason. Sure. So I come in as like the busy professional. Paint me the picture for kind of like the process from even how do I get in touch with you guys to either start learning how to convert one of my houses or maybe buy a new house. What would the process look like? And then kind of what would be my commitments as an ongoing landlord?
Nick talks people through this literally every day. So
all right, perfect. I'm gonna talk to you then, Nick.
I'll pass the baton.
No, I think the interesting thing, and like Atticus was saying, it's a very consultative process, right? Because we're dealing with the spectrum of brand new investor to the space like I was, to institutional investor, to fund manager. So I think it's more or less like understanding your goals. How quickly do you want to move? Do you have active inventory we can underwrite now? Are you searching for a product? Are you searching in a market? If you're agnostic to market, what's the highest potential market? And what we do as sales reps with Padsplit is we're very consultative throughout that whole thing, right? So I've worked with fund managers, and one thing I found that's really successful is I have a person in Dallas, Jose. He was kind of like a scrappy guy initially with Padsplit, bought his first Padsplit. He's a GC. He's now scaled to 8 doors. He's a GC and a PM. So now I can go to this guy and say, hey, he's agnostic to area. He doesn't care where we go. He wants to go where we have great outcomes and where housing is reasonably affordable. So what I do is I grab him, get him in a meeting with Jose. Jose is now my connection to help this guy who's a fun person through the process, right? And that's very tailored to who he is. If he doesn't have the time, if he doesn't have the bandwidth, I'm going to need Jose to be working with him hands-on, me too, coming in where I'm needed. And then if there's someone else who's just new to real estate investing, like that's a whole nother story. But the consultative nature to what we do and sharing best practices and talking to other hosts and learning things, how to create your listing and how to make the pictures look good, how to make it just as functional as possible is all learnings that we've collected through our tenure being with this company. So it's very consultative. It's very selective in how you want to approach it. And we adjust to how you want to work, I would say.
Okay. And if I have, let's say, I'm a Denver guy here and I have some existing Denver single family homes, you could help me look at the addresses, look at the basic floor plans and say, hey, here are some potential ways we could upgrade for a good Padsplit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we view everything through the lens of what makes it the most functional, the highest earning Padsplit you can have, right? So those are some practices we can do, and go through baseline underwriting, get comps from many areas, and like all of our major markets, we can go into the data and show you exactly what occupancy looks like, what room rates look like. And room rates are something that's, it's up to the host to adjust their room rate, but we can provide them with averages in the area and give them the tightest picture we can of what net profit could look like on this asset, essentially.
And so you guys help me also just the consultation will say, hey, here's some vendors that are familiar with Padsplit. Go talk to this GC or okay, you'll help quarterback all that stuff.
Yeah.
Once we're through, I'll say the onboarding and the initial construction phase on there, assuming there's some light value add. What's my responsibility? Is it very similar to like me managing a traditional long-term property manager? Like how many hours a month am I working with you or working with, potentially adjusting the pricing?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it depends on initial outcomes, right? And I've had some clients who've listed properties at a higher price point than I quoted them. And I said, you're totally free to do that, but understand there might need to be some adjustments made if you don't get the move-ins. The person I'm referring to actually got all the move-ins at the price she wanted within a week. So it's hard to go back and forth with that. But we also have GMs who are in individual markets who can look at a property and go through their listing, their pricing, their photos, and optimize that to make it work as good as it possibly can for Padsplit. And that's on the back end of the deal, right? We're talking about you've gone through reno, you furnished it, it's live. Now you might need some micro adjusting to fix some things and optimize it. We still do that too, right? So that consultative nature continues through the process through your first Padsplit and scaling beyond.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, and I just want to stress here, nobody's given a hard sell here, right? And because we don't have our own contractor or it's our turnkey system, nobody's guiding anybody to any specific deal or outcome. We're pretty confident that we are the absolute best at the things that we do. And outside of that, it's just how do we ensure that you're successful or you have the best relationship with any vendor in that ecosystem? Because we want you to expand, right? We want you to go do more and more and more. And 50% of our growth comes from expansion of existing hosts, which I think is probably a testament to the value that we do add.
Yeah, that's a great stat. So I got a really random question here. I wrote this down while we were talking. Years ago, one of my clients, who's a house hacker and did some room by room rental, he scraped a bunch of Craigslist data.
Mm-hmm.
And he came to the conclusion, I think he scraped about 30 properties. So, somewhat small sample size, but he said bedrooms with a private bathroom in Denver, and this was, I think, 2018, commanded $103 a month rent premium over bedrooms with a shared bathroom. Do you guys have any data for like the private bathroom versus shared bathroom rent premium?
Tons. Variable by market.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, of course, the private bathrooms always rent for more.
But how much more? It really just depend on the market.
It really, yeah, it does.
Okay.
It really depends on the market and the price point of the home. But yeah, I mean, I would venture a guess, like for my inventory in Atlanta, it's like $50 to $75 a week more for a private bathroom.
Really?
Versus a shared. The challenge is just like you still have it's like a pyramid, right? And the base of the pyramid is always the widest. And so you still need value-driven inventory for the people who are strictly price-driven, who don't care about sharing a bathroom. And that population is generally larger than the people who are paying the premium for that private bathroom. But yeah, I mean, that's probably pretty close, I'd say, in most of our markets. Higher price point markets generally, that range expands, and probably better to look at it. I've never thought about it in terms of a percentage basis, but it's probably more accurate to look at it that way.
Okay.
But like I, as a host, am building new construction, and we're doing 3/4 private baths versus 25% shared baths to put it in perspective.
So if the whole overall house has about 3/4 of the rooms have a private bath, so
Correct.
4 bedrooms will have 3 bathrooms in there?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. So you want some balance, but overall, like adding a bathroom is almost always going to be worth the return on investment.
Okay.
I have seen very few cases where that's not true.
Okay, that's very helpful. And something else, I want to jump into a spreadsheet here too, but we were talking about this before the podcast, is that, and you mentioned it briefly on here, but I want to highlight it, that you are seeing an increasing number of house hackers, people who are buying it as a primary residence, and they're not room by rooms. You're seeing an increased interest level from Padsplit nationwide. And what I find very exciting is that you're actually able to help someone do a Padsplit while they're living in one of the bedrooms as an owner occupant, correct?
Sure.
Because that's been one of the issues we've had, is like, if even just any type of traditional property management, if the owner is on site, most property managers say, hey, we can't deal with that.
Yeah.
But you guys are able to.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if now, like, this is a relatively new trend. I think I told you before the podcast started, we have 20% of our inbound leads now that are owner occupants. So it's a sizable percentage.
Yeah.
And we're revamping the entire flow right now for those users. We're generally self-serve, where, like, I can't really afford as a business owner to have Nick consult with every owner occupant. And we are right now rebuilding the entire education consultation process around those individuals.
For like a house hacker track?
Exactly.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, for the house hacker track. And actually, I was just pinging back and forth with the guy who's really spearheading this now, around a series of videos that walks through, hey, here are all of the things that you need to do to really be successful in this space. But yeah, we can do it now. Anybody can go to the site right now and self onboard their listing. So I love Nick, but, like, you don't have to talk to Nick in order to, like, onboard a unit. You should, right? You should certainly go through host onboard training to understand, okay, like, how does this system actually work? And I think it's an hour worth of your time. It's free. You don't have to pay for YouTube University. But yeah, there's a lot you can learn there as well. But yeah, you can list any unit right now. I've actually listed one unit in my own house. I have 4 boys now, but from 2020, March of 2020, COVID, for the next 3 years, rented a room in my house just to try it out and see what it was like on the platform.
How's that work? And this is your primary residence, right?
Yeah, it worked out well.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was almost like she was invisible, candidly. But it was great when we left town and needed somebody to watch the dogs or take care of the chickens or whatever.
Yeah. Huh, that's really cool. I want to jump over to a spreadsheet here. So I know we got a lot of people listening to this and some people watching. So we're sharing a spreadsheet and we'll talk through numbers on the screen as well. But this is a room by room rental in Westminster, so a Denver suburb, that one of our agents, Jeff White, who's a room by room specialist, helped one of his clients buy, I believe, earlier this year. And so they bought a 5-bedroom house and converted it to 8 bedrooms at a $520,000 purchase price. And I want to just walk through very high level numbers to see what kind of, like, just have some fun debate and see how you guys interpret room by room stuff. Now, to set this up, this is a house hacker who is self-managing. He bought this house 3% down at a 7.25% interest rate. So pretty, great leverage there as an investor. We're estimating about $15,000 in initial repair cost. And so that's about $5,000 per bedroom. And you guys are saying about $7,500 per bedroom. So pretty close there. And also a lot of our room by room people are, they're really scraping the pennies by on there. But looking at the OpEx on here, we are looking at about $2,300 a year in taxes, $2,200 in annual property insurance. And I want to take a note on here. If I'm getting insurance and I'm going from a long-term rental to a pad split, is there a special type of insurance that I need to get or additional clauses I need to make sure my broker puts in there?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I don't know for an owner occupant. I can tell you I didn't change my my insurance on mine when I did it. There are certain carriers who will have exclusions around rent by the room, some who don't. We have a number of insurance providers who specifically cater to pad split type setup, and there's actually one that's coming up with a dedicated program now. They won't do any room by the room, but they will do pad split specifically because we can show historically low loss runs for them. So yeah, there are dedicated insurance providers, but as you know, I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds of
Oh,
insurance
yeah.
providers out there. So I wouldn't want to make any blanket statements there, but there's insurance available, and it's priced very competitively from what I've seen so far.
So it's a nothing burger. Just be aware of it. Check with your insurance provider, but
Yeah,
no big obstacles or big premiums there.
Exactly.
Okay.
You may have to change carriers if they get really ornery about it, but we haven't noticed any significant premium difference for the units that I host.
Okay. And now we're looking at, I'm going to switch over tabs here because this is House X. So in year 2, we are expecting about $76,000 in annual income across 8 units or 8 bedrooms on there. And then he underwrote a 2% vacancy, which I know is extremely low for just vacancy in general. What do you guys kind of look at your vacancy at, or how would you underwrite vacancy?
Yeah, I mean, again, it depends on the market and specifically where you are in a sub area of the market. So we have a theory that we trust the people who are closest to the problems that are best equipped to solve them. But yeah, I would say that's really low. Not the least of which is simply because as people move in and out of the rooms, you have to take that vacancy into account. So certainly on a pro forma, I would say minimum 5% vacancy, just because when somebody moves out, like we refill rooms faster than anyone. Median across the entire platform is 8 days. Okay,
8 days for a turn.
Yeah,
Wow.
but that's from when it's listed. So if
Okay.
it takes you, I don't know, 15 days to get your guys together and turn the room, well, that's 23 days. Right?
So 8 days from when it's listed, it's usually,
Correct.
and by that you mean someone's paid the first week and moving in.
That's correct.
So what type of like turn cost do you see typical for
$81.
per room? $81.
Yes, that I actually happen to know off the top of my head.
I love that you did.
Yeah, it's about $81. So because they're furnished, you don't have to deal with people moving furniture in and out and scuffing up the walls. And even if they don't scuff up the walls, I mean, I don't know if anybody's ever moved a bed around, but like, you move your bed away from the wall, lo and behold, you have like just marks on the walls, or you need to repaint or dust or whatever. Well, in the case where you have it fully furnished, it's the equivalent of a hotel room turn. And so you go in there, you clean it, you replace the mattress cover. Worst case scenario, you're replacing a mattress, but that's usually only after they've been there for a long time, or they've been hard on the mattress. But yeah, it's just not super significant. And you're not, one of the benefits of rent by the room generally is like, you're not having to go in and re-renovate these houses in the same way that you are in a single family rental or an apartment. And so the hard turns very rarely exist.
Yeah, I mean, my average unit turn is $2,000, $2,500
Yeah.
a unit, for a long-term rental. And
Oh yeah,
hopefully it's every couple of years, but sometimes that's, every year or so.
yeah.
So anyone, is that mostly cleaning or is that just?
Yeah, mostly cleaning. Yeah, I mean,
Wow.
you send somebody in to clean the room, and maybe they're doing a little paint touch ups. Maybe, like I say, they're replacing the mattress cover for $19 off Amazon. But that's there's not a lot to it.
And so is the landlord hiring someone, or do you guys have like a vendor list of people to help with the turns?
Same thing. Yeah, I mean, it's we build this ecosystem of vendors, and everybody has a different strategy. I know Nick says he uses TaskRabbit all the time.
Oh, that's a great idea.
It's great. I love it. Hourly
yeah.
rate, really good workers.
What's your average cost per turn, Nick, for your portfolio?
Man, I mean, it's probably around $64. That's like an hour and a half of cleaning, depending if I'm getting a mattress. I'm changing the mattress protector. If there's no other damage, which there typically isn't, it's very short.
Wow.
Right. And within the product, your room goes into flip status when somebody moves out automatically. Once you get that room turned, it's 2 clicks and then it's automatically advertising again. So, I mean, compressing time to revenue to get that room active again is the goal, right? Hiring someone outsourced on TaskRabbit, give them access to the house, clean the room, flip it, get it advertising.
And in terms of like, have you guys noticed any other bigger like common area, turn cost, or just I'll say kind of CapEx type costs for like the common areas or anything like that?
Lower. Significantly lower. Yeah, and it seems counterintuitive, right? Everyone's like, oh, more people, you got multiple adults sharing a house, it's going to be more, just like it was in my dorm room in college. Well, generally you're not renting to a frat house. But aside from that, I mean, what I noticed when I was comparing P&Ls over that 7-year period of rent by the room versus apartments versus single family houses, long-term rentals, and some commercial stuff as well, what the silent killer for most landlords is vacancy loss and turn cost.
Yep.
Right. The first pad split prototype, the reason I converted it, excuse me, the reason I converted that house to pad split was because I had a $46,000 insurance claim on a turn where the tenant had lived there for 5 years, but absolutely destroyed the property. And I'm sure many people listening have had this experience where like 2 weeks in to them moving, you're like, oh man, this is going to be bad. Right?
Yes.
This is going to be bad. And it's a huge advantage of rent by the room generally. And I don't think this is exclusive to pad split by any stretch, but because you have other stakeholders who are sharing the space, they are less hard on the space. Like, I don't describe myself as a neat or tidy person, but when I go stay at my mother-in-law's house, I'm living out of a little bitty bag. Right? I'm making sure that everything's picked up. And so I think some of that is just human nature that carries over. But the other part is your capacity for early intervention. So there are more like small maintenance things, but it's the things that you as an owner want to know about. Like, you want to know when the sink is dripping. You especially want to know if the P-trap under the kitchen sink is dripping.
Oh, yeah.
Because I've had many of those situations where, I had a great long-term whole house tenant, and then I found out after they moved out that the entire kitchen floor was rotted because you had this leak that nobody knew about. And so, like, the good news, bad news about rent by the room and pad split specifically is you now have visibility 24/7, 365 inside that house and what's going on. It's good because your capacity for early intervention, nipping problems in the bud, is exponentially greater than it is as a traditional single family or multifamily landlord, where your visibility ends at the door, right? At the entry door to the property. And you're sending cleaners out twice a month in most cases in a pad split rent by the room model. So, like, you just have eyes on the prize, and you have other stakeholders who are reporting things much more frequently than they would otherwise. And I don't think I've had to go in, and I'm including that house from 2009. I have not had a single rent by the room house that I have had to go in and, quote, turn the entire property.
Wow.
Or re-renovate. Now, like, the only thing that you'll do, we were talking about floor coverings on the drive down, like, don't do carpet, right? Like, that
Always have to replace it too often.
Yeah, exactly. But that's true for regular rentals as well. So stay with solid surface floors where you can, and it'll make your life a lot easier. But yeah, it's actually lower long term. Your vacancy loss is much lower because if you have 6 bedrooms in a house, you want to account for more than 2% vacancy, but when you have vacancy, it's okay, well, you have 1 room or 2 rooms that are vacant. Almost never do you have an entire property vacant where it's not generating some revenue to cover your outlay of costs. And then on the turn costs, this is just something I learned over time that, turning those individual rooms is much cheaper than having to go in and turn an entire apartment or an entire house. And it's one of the reasons why I'm a firm believer in the furnishings as well. But kitchens generally stay cleaner and bathrooms stay cleaner. And if you're sending a cleaning company out twice a month or more in some cases, it's better maintained, right? I mean, you're doing the maintenance that you know that your tenant should already be doing, but you also know that they're probably not.
Yeah.
I think people tend to respect the spaces more knowing it's a co-living space too, right? We do a lot of education on the front end of saying shared kitchen. Sometimes,
for like your members?
Yeah, like sometimes shared bathroom. And they go in knowing that, I am sharing these spaces with other people. I should be respectful, which tends to happen. And I think I have probably 3 times the amount of damage in my personal home with my twin 5-year-old daughters than I have in any of my pad splits. That goes for cleaning, damage, everything. So I've been pleasantly surprised on how well they operate, even though it's a co-living property.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I've heard similar trends where, like, I know from our room by room rentals, people spend a lot less time in the common areas, usually more time in their bedroom or off premise. I've heard the same thing from Airbnb property managers. We're like, hey, we have cleaners in there twice a week. Like we have a lot of small, tiny stuff, but we capture, hey, that leak. So a $200 plumbing repair versus a $3,000 or $30,000 water damage.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense. So looking back to here, so we're increasing rents. Our expenses are staying relatively low. And I mean, those two things lead to what I like, which is increase NOI. Like all I care about, I should say, my main thing I care about is NOI. And we see some big NOI boosters on here. So at this property, I'm going to kind of skip down here, and we are projecting, self-managing with a couple, I'll say aggressive, variables with like the vacancy on there, 11.6% cap rate. So that's off the 520 purchase price. And then off their new NOI once they move out. And so, we add in, say more conservative stuff on there. We're seeing a lot of times about a 7 to 10% cap rate, plus or minus 1% here and there for, the outliers. But a 7% cap rate is often what we see for like our room by room rentals. Does that jive with what you guys see in terms of like, I don't know if you guys look at cap rates with your portfolio, but.
We do. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, like, again, very, very market dependent, right? An SFR yield in Denver is going to be very different than one in Atlanta or in Phoenix even to some degree. But across the board, what we've seen is SFR to pad split is consistently a 2x increase in NOI on average.
A 2x NOI increase.
Yes. Yeah. So more affordable and more profitable simultaneously, right? That's the whole strategy. And I don't think, I mean, this is a little aggressive, but yeah, I mean, you guys said for a good SFR, you're at 5 realistically here, or
for like a long-term cap rate.
Yeah,
about 5-ish.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's totally doable for the right deal. If you're going to try to do something at scale, I would probably think more in the 7 to 8 range. If you're going to go just blow the doors off a thing and start buying 20 houses a year, just again, supply issues, inventory, you're not going to find the best deals. But yeah, it's almost always going to be 2x on average. And that's after all of our fees as well.
All right. So rule of thumb, back of the napkin math is going to be about a 2x increase in NOI going from a long-term to a pad split.
Correct.
That is phenomenal. All right. So I know you guys don't have any live units in Denver yet. I know you were texting your team before. I think you got some hitting live in December, right? We're recording this right before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And you're going to go have some stuff live in December, right?
Yeah, we've got 3 houses that are supposed to come on this month in theory. I'm skeptical given that Thanksgiving is next week.
Yeah, that doesn't do anyone any favors.
But yeah, so I would certainly say we should have 3 houses by the end of the year for sure. Cool. And there are another 42 units behind that.
Well, one of the things I want to do, because we got connected, right? As you guys were launched the Denver market. I know we tentatively have planned to do some property walks when we can and do some more educational like webinars, especially once we have a couple like I'll say more stabilized properties on here. So for people out there that want information, of course, go to Padsplit directly and talk to Nick or one of his colleagues out there to go through numbers. If you still want to keep learning, make sure you stay plugged in the podcast email list because we'll do some deeper dive webinars into more of the how-to. I know you guys have some events in January that we'll promote and share with everyone, and also just doing some property walks when we get all the stars to line, which
sounds awesome.
Always a great way. Like, hey, go out there and see everything in real life is what I like to do. So I have covered my main questions here and topics with you, and I know you guys are looking at numbers all day. Any other like insights or tidbits you want to share that we didn't cover in the podcast?
The main thing is, I mean, for anybody who's interested in just solving the problem, I think one thing that we've noticed with a lot of our hosts is everybody comes for the revenue, right? I mean, I started in this business because I was trying to just create an income for my family. But they come for the income, stay for the impact. It's just, we haven't really talked about the impact side as much. And particularly here in Denver, where you have a massive population of unhoused individuals. Like we see a huge number of folks who are working full time that are struggling to afford housing and maybe skipping around from motel to motel or living in their car or whatever, who can create financial independence for themselves. And I tell you what, like, I mean, the only reason that I continue to do what I do and work as hard as I do is because it feels really good to be able to see those types of impacts and outcomes at scale. We've seen some of those folks who have gone from homelessness to living in a pad split to starting their own businesses. In some cases, have bought their own houses, and in some cases, like, are now hosts.
That's awesome.
So
that's like full cycle.
Yeah, it is. It's really cool to see. So it is financial independence on both sides, like for the host, but also for the opportunities that you're creating for those residents as well. And yeah, it's, I think, a big reason why so many of us continue to do the work that we do.
Well, I love the vision. I love the good social impact on there. And that made me think of one more question. How many more like individual rooms or units do you estimate, and if you know this number, does America need? Because we know what we're between 4 to 8 million housing units or houses short. What type of, on the supply and demand side for room by room, do you have any estimates for how much is needed or how much demand there is?
Yeah, it's massive. It's massive. I mean,
it's got to be the millions, right?
Yeah, it's well into the millions. I mean, my goal is to reach 1 million units by 2030. And
1 million by 2030 is the goal.
And even that will be just I think a small part of the total market. But one thing that we didn't touch on that I think is just a really interesting stat. We talked about how supply is a big part of the problem, and you read about a lack of supply everywhere. What people don't mention is that we have more housing square footage per person today in America than we've ever had in U.S. history. So it's not a supply problem in the way that most people think, where you have to build, because you have more than enough empty bedrooms to solve the problem literally overnight. Like you could solve this problem tomorrow simply by filling empty bedrooms and still have millions of bedrooms left over to spare. And you could actually, if you converted 1% of housing inventory in the United States to rent by the room, guess what? Like, you're done. Like, you've literally you've solved the housing crisis in that you have created 7.3 million units with less than 1% of housing inventory in the U.S. So
sounds like a good political campaign to run on.
Yeah,
that's that's like,
yeah. Oh, by the way,
that numbers actually make sense.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And oh, by the way, we haven't used any subsidy dollars for any of the units that we've created. So yeah, there's that as well. So I think it's I always end my pitches with just join us, and like I really think this has the capacity to be a movement, but it just makes too much sense. It really does. And I've been at it for a while. We've got, again, over 1,000 hosts that are on the journey with us, and I continue to hear the same things over and over. And it's both fulfilling and frustrating. Like, why can't everybody get on board with this? But for anybody who's house hacking now, I think it's probably obvious to those in the audience as well.
Yeah, that last study you shared kind of blew my mind, because I've always looked at just pure housing inventory. I think we all know the stats, starter homes have just dwindled. Like, we're all just building America's just building giant homes now. And I love your perspective, like, hey, convert the bedrooms to these bigger homes. And that is an amazing solution to this.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. Nick, thank you. Atticus, thank you. I learned a lot. I'm excited to learn more as an investor. I know we got a lot of people listening and watching the podcast, so I'll learn more as well. So thank you. And of course, we'll be doing some more events and some more property walks and looking at some more spreadsheets in the future as well. So thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, appreciate it.
All right, everyone out there, thanks for watching. If you guys have any questions, reach out. If you want to get to know them, go to Padsplit. And if you want to be looped into other educational events and some property walks, make sure you're on our email list or reach out to me and the team. We'll put you on the VIP list. Thanks a lot, everyone.